So this is our sixth and final midweek video in the series, The Church Jesus is Building. And I hope that this series has been as inspiring for you as it has been for me. And I hope that these midweek videos have stimulated some really good conversations in your life groups. I really want to encourage you, if you've missed any of the Sunday morning messages, go and jump on YouTube, go and take a listen. I really want to encourage you to make sure that you've listened through all of the 6 Sunday messages, because the Sunday messages, together with these midweek videos and together with this devotional book, they all dovetail together in this series. And so I really want to encourage you to make sure that you've maximized all 3 of those avenues through this series. And if you've missed anything out, go back and make sure you fill it in. So this week we've been looking at another big truth about the church that Jesus is building, and that is that the church that Jesus is building is generational. It goes from generation to generation. Jesus has been building his church for the past 2,000 years or so, and through that he's been building generation upon generation upon generation. And we are, as a church, as you would have heard on Sunday, we stand on the shoulders of other men and women, and the generations to come after us stand on our shoulders. And so it's really an incredible thing to think about that, and to think that every decision that you and I make every single day doesn't just affect our personal lives or our immediate family, but it affects our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and the generations of children that are linked and influenced by you and by me in our church. And so whether you have children yet, or don't have children, or never will have children, remember that we're part of a family. This church is called a family. And so they are spiritual sons and daughters. So every single one of us has a responsibility to the next generation. And so this is the thing. We've got a responsibility to glean from the previous generation and to pass that on to the next generation. And we've got a responsibility to not fight the same battles that the previous generation fought, but to stand on their shoulders, fight the battles that are intended for our generation, so that the generations after us can run into the purposes that God has got for them, not being held back by your and my poor decisions, or your and my lack of faith, or your and my fear, but that we step into the purposes of God so that the generation after us can step into their purposes in their generation. So I want to ask the questions that you would have seen in this devotional book through this week. I want to ask the 6 questions that you will see each day in the devotional book. I want to just throw that out for us to think about again. The first question is, what are you doing today to leave a spiritual inheritance for those who will come after you? Number 2, what are you doing today to prioritize church for your children? Number 3, what are you doing to create a spiritual launch pad for your children, both spiritual and physical? Number 4, is there anything that you're allowing the enemy to steal from you regarding church? You will have seen in the devotional that if you pick up an offense in church, that offense gets passed on to the next generation, and they get 10 times more offended. And in that way, the enemy steals from us. So we need to deal with the offense today. Number 5, what can you do to genuinely honor someone in the church who is older than you today? What can we do to genuinely honor someone? Because we know that honor breeds life. And where there is honor, life flows from one generation to the next. So with those questions in mind, listen to the scripture in Psalm 145 verse 4. It says this: "One generation shall commend your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts." Let me read it again. "One generation shall commend your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts." And I want to pull 3 truths from that verse today. The first one is this: this is a long-term investment. This is not short-term. This is not just one quick decision, one quick moment. It says one generation shall declare your mighty works to the next generation. How long do you think that declaration takes place? For the whole generation. This is decades and decades of declaring God's mighty works to the next generation. It's not just a once-off thing. It's not just a let's go to church once a month thing. This is about faithfully, week in and week out, building a life with priorities that show the next generation what is most important. I've seen it happen where people have followed the Lord passionately, and then their passion has cooled off, and their children have picked up on the cooling off, and they've just got cooler. And the reality is, the children pick up on the end result, not the beginning result. They don't remember how you started. People remember how you finish. This is an ongoing long-term investment. Long-term investment. Number 2, your life is God's review. Let me say that again. Your life is God's review. You know, when you jump online and you purchase something, or you get some service online, there's an opportunity to leave a review, or you can leave a review for an app or for something. And those reviews mean a lot to the next person that comes along. They see the reviews and they decide, can I buy that product or that service or not? Is it worth it? Your life and my life, we are that review on God. Your life and my life, we are that review. The verse I read says we commend God's works. In other words, we recommend God through our lives. Our lives are the review that either encourages or discourages the next generation to follow him. The next generation looks at you and looks at me and says, following Jesus is the most important thing, or they look at our lives and say, following Jesus is an optional thing that I can tag onto my life when I have some time. And that leads me to my third and final point. You have to speak it out. That verse in Psalm 145 says, declare his mighty works. There's a speaking out. We have to speak it out. It's so easy to declare all that is wrong in life. There's so much negativity, there's so much pessimism, there's so much of this kind of attitude of, oh, it is what it is, you know. But we can live that way, or we can live a life that sees the breakthrough of God, where there is regularly the testimony of God's goodness and God's faithfulness in our lives. And when that happens, we put that on our lips and we begin to declare what God is doing, not what he's not doing. It's so easy to say, this is what the enemy is doing. We need to put the emphasis on what God is doing. And then we let our life at church match our life at home. And let our life at home match our life when we're out there braaiing, especially with those non-Christian friends. That the words that come out of our mouths match in all those different spaces and places, because our children are watching and learning the whole time. Let me end by reminding us of some of these powerful quotes that you've heard over the last little while. Carrie Neoff says this: I believe that when the parents miss church, the kids are the biggest losers. This is a long-term investment into the next generation, remember that. Chris Vinan spoke about knowing a number of friends and family who've stopped going to church. And he says, I'm thinking, your faith is okay. I'm not going to throw a legal spanner in the works. But when I look at your kids and when I look at your grandkids, the further we move from the flame of God, the greater is the cooling and the greater the distance from the Eternal One. That's a scary thought and leaves us with some serious weighty responsibility. And then this 4-generation fade that you've heard mentioned a few times. Number one, parents don't make church a huge priority for their kids. That leads to number 2, kids grow up and make it less of a priority for their kids. Number 3, those kids grow up and make it no priority for their kids. Number 4, those kids, the 4th generation, grows up with no concept of God. The person who wrote that went on to say that our priorities today impact the generations that come after us. And that's exactly what it is. Your priorities and my priorities today are solidified in the next generation. If the church is generational, let me leave you with this final question as you break into your groups to discuss. What are you prioritizing today?